Thank you for joining us today. I'm so glad you're here. I have another amazing visionary I'm excited to introduce you to. His name is Todd Dewett. He's a PhD. He's a best-selling educator at LinkedIn Learning, a leadership guru, a keynote speaker, 5 times TEDx speaker, and a best-selling author. Dr. Todd Dewett is a visionary leader who makes some of the world's most popular online courses, career coaching, writer and speaker teaching on practical insights. He brings to life education and entertainment in his presentations, bringing on inspiration for you to take action. His speaking gigs have included Boeing, Microsoft, IBM, Google, General Electric, Ernst & Young, and State Farm, to name a few. Dr. Dewett focuses on career development coaching, leadership development, public speaking, live events, and going to college campuses to speak and share his knowledge. Dr. Todd Dewett is one of the world's most watched leadership personalities and is an authenticity expert and an Inc. magazine top 100 leadership speaker. His talks focus on leadership behaviors that drives success at work. His quotes have been featured in New York Times, Business Week, Forbes, Time, and he is an award-winning professor and scholar. Delivering over 1,000 speeches, he has motivated and influenced over 20 million professionals around the globe. Now, that's some impact I'm talking about. As one of the most in-demand leadership keynote speakers on the market today, I'm very honored to have him here on the show and share his insights. Welcome, Dr. Todd Dewett. Thank you for joining us today.
Hey, how are you, Noelle?
I'm fabulous. I'm really honored to have you here. I've seen you online. I've seen all the things you've been accomplishing. And I'm really wanting to know what brought you into taking on a leadership role.
I mean, there's some serendipity for sure. I would be lying if I said I planned this all out and it's working exactly as I planned. No, the truth is I started like most people taking the best job I could get out of grad school after an MBA. And I worked for big consulting firms, first Andersen, which is now Accenture, and then Ernst & Young. And learned quickly that I was bright enough to hang out in that world, but I wasn't intrigued enough. I found people very interesting. I found business very interesting, but I wanted to find a different professional home where I could indulge my interest in those things. And so I did that for just a few years before realizing there was a better way to study those things, which was to go get a PhD. So I decided to be a scholar, went and got a PhD at Texas A&M in organizational behavior. And then I became a professor for 10 years, teaching mostly leadership related courses to graduate students. And I thought, you know this very well, Noelle, life happens, doesn't matter how you plan it, it's going to happen its own way. And I thought I was going to be a professor until I was, 70, 75, and then retire very happy. And then, life just changes. I started getting phone calls. Hey, would you come out and give this talk and things like that? And I started taking them more seriously, and I built a website. I got more calls, gave more talks, wrote a book, etc. And it just kept building to the point that about 11 years ago, I had to make a decision. Do I want to be a professor or do I want to be an entrepreneur? Educator who does education differently through speeches, through books, through online courses. And obviously I made that decision and the rest is history. It's been a very, very great, fun last decade for sure.
Well, I found you on LinkedIn. I took your course. It was the Make Quick Decisions course. In 2020, when we were having the pandemic, I did 33 online LinkedIn learning courses.
Nice.
Now, how many have you created and what languages are they in?
Geesh. Well, I'll tell you, it's funny. That course is one of 3, I believe, I've done over time. I've been with them for 12, 13 years now. And 3 of them, if I recall, were improv, meaning we had a schedule. We were working on courses. We got done with them. And then my producer's like, we've got a little time. You're here. You want to just improv something around this topic or this topic? And that one was just us setting up in an office space and me improving something about decision making. And it turned out to be quite popular, even though it's simple and fairly short. I've got, I think, 41 or so courses live now. I've created upwards of 50. A few over time become retired for different reasons. They have been seen, oh goodness, by millions and millions of people in almost every country on planet Earth in 10 different languages. I can't even quote them all anymore, but if you can, all the major languages are covered. And, pretty much every day, several thousand people are going to consume some of that content, which makes me, Noelle, the luckiest person you're probably ever going to meet.
Well, what an excellent teacher. I mean, 20 million people so far impacted and counting, I would say. And I actually wrote down some of the courses that you've written and did because I wanted to share these, unless you want to share them.
No,
Some
feel
of
free.
them I think are really impactful because people are either stepping into management for the first time or into a career. So let me just share some of the ones that I've noted. New Manager Foundations, Embracing Unexpected Change, which is pretty much daily probably, right? Performance Review Management. Oh my gosh, like that's a really big one. I can't tell you how many times I've noticed employers are lacking in that skill set. So that bingo on that one. Let's see here. Sustainable Employment Engagement, Top 10 Rules for Highly Effective Leadership, Enhancing Individual and Group Creativity. Okay, you gave a whole speech on creativity, I saw. I want to talk to you about more of that one too as well.
Sure.
Coping strategies in difficult times, using authenticity to build productive relationships. I've written a handful of good things here. Trust me, it's a bunch of twisters. Solving relationship problems at work. We all carry a different frequency and vibration. That is going to happen. So having the best strategies in place is monumental, I would say. Difficult situations, solutions for managers, letting an employee go, how to present and stay on point, onboarding new hires as a manager. Another, when you change jobs, you can see if an employer is really good at it or not so good at it. So that's really good for anybody who owns any business, big or small, right? You're hitting the board across the board here. Time management, tips for working remotely, which everyone's still doing, even if it's a hybrid kind of situation. Another really great course. Learning from failure. Every day we should be failing somewhat to keep learning, right? Growing. We learn that way. Building self-confidence. Lead like a boss. Giving your elevator pitch. I mean, look at, he's covering all of the across the board. So when you get these course, I guess, incentives to build them, is there something that happens that you're like directed, this is the next thing that needs to be done and taught?
Yes and no. So there's different ways content finds its way onto LinkedIn Learning. The traditional approach they have is that people on their staff in different ways go out and find thought leaders, experts, and so on in different areas that the staff there at LinkedIn has identified in their big roadmap of issues that they believe they need more of, or gaps to fill topically, etc., things that are popular and so on. And then they would come to authors like me and go, hey, I'm really interested in this topic and this topic. One of those, maybe both, really appear like they fit you. Let's talk and see if there's a fit. So that's the way I did most of my career with LinkedIn until the pandemic, when, of course, so many things changed. So around that time, because they had to shut down production facilities, they started changing their view of content created by outside vendors, outside experts, consulting firms, training organizations, independents like me, and so on. And I took the opportunity a couple of years ago to build a home studio and start producing my own content. So instead of waiting on them to go, hey, what do you think about, I started going, I have interests and I have competencies in these areas. I'm going to produce these 4 courses and I'm going to offer them to them for licensing. And if they take them, great. I've added more to the LinkedIn library, which is an amazing library. And if they say, no, it doesn't fit for us, then I'm going to go find another home for that content. But now I'm just in charge of finding and creating the content that I want. So that's the approach I'm currently using. I'm an independent content creator, and thankfully, a lot of what I do is licensed by LinkedIn.
That's pretty fabulous. I have to say, I've created several courses. They're sitting in the queue and I'm debating what I'm going to do with them or where they should go. So it's funny how I think a lot of people are doing different things based on your expertise, your experience in life. And so some of us who have a few decades under our belt definitely have a little more knowledge and wisdom to share and can create a different impact, right? So for those out there who are interested in creating courses, can you share about, the steps to take or the success and failures you've had so we can learn how to do it better?
Well, sure. I mean, there's no one perfect answer to that question. That issue is really interesting and ever evolving rapidly right now as we speak. The idea of content creators sounds like we've been talking about it for a few years, but relatively speaking, it's not it's not saturated and old, and there's only one way to do it. Not at all. So there are some bigger players. Maybe the biggest is LinkedIn Learning, and you need to find out how, which is very hard because they're huge now and very successful, to find contacts there or relationships with authors like me, where we can give you maybe our 10 cents and encourage you about, how to think about finding topics you might propose. Because when you can contact, anyone can contact on LinkedIn, the team there, and drop an idea. They're always looking for authors. The odds may not be great given their immense size and success now, but you still have that right. But there's many more options. You can start simple. Forget trying to be a big wig over at LinkedIn. You can just use your phone and start creating content for YouTube or your own website blog. That's the easy entry for all people to say to themselves, do I like doing this? Do I have any natural skill? Forget the high tech, forget the editing. Can I look in the camera and say something people find understandable and useful, maybe even motivational? And then start posting and see how people react. And if you are led to believe in the first 6 months, 1 year of doing this, then you can get more serious. You can spend a lot of money, a few thousand, many thousands, and buy a great camera and lighting and the green screen. I have a team that works on the back end. They help film during a day of shooting, and then they do all the editing on the back. So the only thing I do is conceive of ideas, write scripts, and deliver them. But aside from LinkedIn and the low bar, YouTube, anyone can use. There are many other emerging platforms, many, and lots of them are small. It's not clear who's going to survive long term, but there are other big ones you could consider. For example, Udemy, Udemy, interesting, wonderful firm. They're a competitor to LinkedIn. They have a different business model. Anyone who creates a course, just like you, Noelle, can take it when it's ready and upload it to their system. They have a public market, and they also have a business-focused market, and your course may or may not be selected to be in their coveted business database. But anyone can post courses there and start trying to draw eyeballs to it through whatever funnels and channels that you're a part of on social media, your newsletter, and elsewhere. So I have to say, even though it feels exciting and maybe intimidating to a lot of people, the barriers to entry today to being a content creator are so low, nobody has an excuse anymore. If you have ideas you think are worth sharing, just start with the iPhone and YouTube and start sharing and see how people react.
I'm so glad you said that, because I hadn't even planned to go this route, even though I have a background in broadcast journalism, and I've been doing press and media for the Newport Beach Film Festival since 2005. It's been a long time.
Hmm.
And I just was going to write books and be creative on that content. And then all of a sudden, I started working with some camera people I wanted to talk to about creating a course. And then when I did a couple takes, they're like, "You're crushing it on the first take every time." Out of 35 takes, I only redid it twice at that point in time. And
You're
they were
my league.
like,
That's abnormal.
right, that's what they're saying. They're like, "Wait a minute, you need your own TV channel." And that's how this was spawned.
Yeah.
I was like, "Wait a minute, I wasn't planning this," and now I'm learning every single component of it, because I enjoy it, and I did study parts of it throughout my life, and now I'm fine tuning it because it's a whole new skill set, because there's a lot of new platforms and software. I'm using professional editing software I hadn't touched in many years, but I'm loving it. And the creativity is flowing out and just growing. And that's how you're talking about your creativity levels. Tell us how you tap into that and what happens to you, because you talk all about creativity.
Well, it's funny. I mean, my first love as a scholar, when I decided to leave industry and then study industry in different ways by becoming a PhD guy, my first love, because you have to focus really narrowly to get a PhD on a topic. My first love was creativity, employee creativity. So what is it that we do as colleagues, especially as leaders at work, that make people more or less creative, and why? And how can we help them such that overall we're a little more creative? Fascinating question, fascinating area of study. And even though over the next 20 years, I've morphed into maybe a career and leadership generalist, which I love, that's by choice. I started really narrow with that topic. And I was just fascinated by this idea, Noelle. We go to work, men and women every day go to work, and we follow the rules. We do what we're told, all of which makes sense, all of which is required, but not necessarily fulfilling. And I'm kind of in the niche where the people who follow me want to recognize the acceptability of a transactional thing we do at work to get a paycheck, but then recognize that more is possible. Purpose is possible. And you know what? To get anywhere near purpose and feeling fulfilled and self-actualized and all those terms we've heard, creativity is going to be involved. So now for people I talk to, it becomes a very personal issue. How do I become a little more creative? How do I behave with others in a way that helps them become a little more creative? And what I found in the study of creativity led me to be a more general leadership and relationships at work person. And that is this: anyone can learn how to do something, but how effective it is depends on not your skill per se with the area. Maybe it's about creativity and how to make creative solutions and problems, or maybe it's to be a mechanical engineer or to be an accountant or whatever the skill set might be. Your ability to be effective with that comes down to a great deal of people skills, communication skills, empathy, humility, vulnerability, how well we can communicate, avoid, and certain times solve conflict, how we can motivate and understand others. All these people skills, which really define my world now, are every bit as important, maybe more important than the core skill itself. So for example, you mentioned some courses I've done. Thank you very much. You mentioned something about pitching your ideas strategically. It's been a fun course for me. I can tell you, here's the 5 things you got to do to really have a chance to pitch upwards, whatever this idea might be that you have. But if you don't know how to engage that by choosing the right words, the right tone of voice, the right time with the right people at the right place, delivered the right way with the right attitude, all people skill stuff. If you don't know how to do that, you can follow those 5 steps very clearly and still never be successful pitching your idea. So creativity was a beginning that just led me on a path to discovering how unbelievably important general people skills are for career success.
True that. And it's funny because I've had my own careers coming and going, and I keep falling back to creativity. And I found this last year, I really realized that was my true passion, and that's where I really had to go. And recently I keep writing, more books keep coming out, and I thought about using Chat GPT at one point because I thought I could eliminate so much time, energy probably, and I've never used that platform. I was going to ask you about that in a minute, but what my experience was, I decided not to use it. I do believe humans have a really unique creative frequency, and only you can create that. So once I started, I'm getting the chills. Once I started doing the writing, I felt my body and soul just expanding and just getting bigger and bigger and more creative and flowing. And it was just like this exciting process. Then I kept learning more and growing more and then researching more. It was just all these magical things were happening. So I'm curious, what are your thoughts on these new AI platforms that are coming out that are supposed to streamline things?
Well, because you got separate issues here. The first issue is how creativity makes you feel as a human, and you just described it so beautifully. Not everyone gets this. Not everyone has an interest in it. Some people are reserved, they're risk averse, they become accountants or whatever we need them to be, and that's beautiful because we need all types to make this thing work. But for people like you and me, and for people who are trying to stop being afraid and show more of this creative thing, it's an amazing euphoric feeling when you finish a blog post that people are going to think about, smile about, share. When you finish a chapter in a book, publish a course, et cetera, et cetera. Or for me, I'm working on a speech right now for a new book, and it is euphoric. It is, look at me, I have stretched, I have scratched, I have danced, I have laughed, I have cried, and at the end, I created that thing. Doesn't that feel great? I just want to validate that. It's very, very, very unique human experience to happily, positively struggle with something and end up with a creation you think is pretty good, maybe even great sometimes. Then comes the question about AI. I'm no expert for sure, big news reader, big observer, and I think that it's very difficult to pass judgment on where this is going. What I do know is that it is rapidly developing, and that's an understatement. The growth in new tools every day and what they're capable of, and these are free tools, is exponential. It's not linear at all. It's happening very rapidly. And I know, because I have kids in high school and college, I know that these tools are being used everywhere. And since I do so much on LinkedIn and have a lot of presence there, I hear from people there about how employees are starting to use it in productive and unproductive ways. So what we know is that it's getting better and better and better at mimicking humans rapidly. And the question is, will we ever be replaceable? People love to argue about that. And I think you should argue about that maybe later when it's more close to being a threat. I don't feel it as a threat. I still feel it mostly as a time saver. But I got to tell you, there's a lot of jobs that we once said just 10 years ago were going to be immune from ever being copied by AI ever. And, you know, doctors, lawyers, all these human specialists, artists. And now we have AI diagnosing in many circumstances on many tests they're doing better than doctors, people who are catching rounding errors and other kinds of errors that accountants are missing, people, AI that can create original art that'll blow your mind. So I'm not 100% convinced that humans are going to be here forever. We're not replaceable. I'm not 100% convinced of that. I think we still have the edge for sure. The question is, how do we maintain that relevance? And I got to tell you, one of the best answers to that question for any of you who are thinking about your career is to be one of the best at understanding and approaching whatever it is you do creatively, because the more creative, unique skills you have, the less replaceable you likely will be.
Thank you. I needed to hear that today.
My pleasure.
Because sometimes I feel like I'm futuristic, or when you're pulling in information or data that is yet to be seen or understood, people kind of scratch their head and go, well, I don't know about that. And then you're like, okay, all right, just now I'll create it so you can see it, feel it, and experience it. That's what we're doing now, right?
Well, here's the thing. I mean, I take someone intelligent like you, we show you a bunch of things created by AI. And I say to you, is this AI or human? I think you have a shot sometimes to go, that feels weirdly algorithmic or something. And I'm not sure I feel the joy and things I expect to see on that topic, on that content from a human. Here's the problem. Most humans are good, but not brilliant. And so as the majority of us are easily fulfilled by whatever an AI tool tells us, because their bar, maybe the average person's bar is a little lower than yours or mine might be, then it's going to creep into our daily life more and more, whether you and I like it or not. So again, my best advice for people is do like you and I, stay abreast of the news and what's going on and how it's being used so that you are in the conversation instead of clueless about what's happening around you. And make sure that when you think about skill development, yes, continuous learning is a lifelong thing. As you think about skill development, you try to be creative and unique as possible, because that doesn't make you perfectly safe, but it makes you more safe than most people for sure.
Got it. Love it. We'll do it.
I
want to ask you too, what are the qualities that actually make up a really good leader that you've experienced and helped build out?
There's so many. I mean, one way you could describe my career is that there's a transition from an old school answer to your question to a more modern, progressive take on that issue. It used to be about competence and confidence and not a whole lot else 30 years ago, so to speak. And today what we're realizing is that having good experience, good IQ is a wonderful foundation, sometimes overrated, but wonderfully important IQ/experience. And there's that confidence, there's the competence, and now there's a host of other skills that science for 30 years has told us matter hugely in a way that we just didn't understand 30, 40, 50 years ago. And that is empathy, feeling how others are feeling and caring about that. Vulnerability, so that others can see you as a human, not just the leader. Communication skills, so you can have not only good ideas, but an ability to express them in a way that people understand and maybe even care about. And I could go on for an hour, but the people side of the equation is now what makes a leader great. It's not hard if you work through hiring in all the ways we know how to vet people. It's not hard to find bright people with good experience, but it is harder to find someone who's really bright and has good experience, who has a positive attitude, an ability to fit into the team, care about them, not just compete against them when we all look for promotions, et cetera, to really put authenticity out there so that you're not acting like a programmed, polished professional, but also a real human being, a colleague that maybe will be worthy of some of your trust and a little rapport. Because listen, ultimately work in terms of which teams and which orgs are successful comes down to creativity, innovation, and change. Hey, what we did yesterday is not good enough for tomorrow. I love those mantras. I've been thinking about them forever. So what kind of leader, to answer your question, helps people embrace that? The one that makes people feel more comfortable, not more fearful. The one that makes people willing and able to speak up, to say things that need to be said, to try things when experiments are necessary, and to be supportive of others who do the same thing. That requires clarity of goals, but more importantly, on the people side, empathy, motivation, ability to inspire and ability to listen so that others can be a part of a collaboration, not someone just receiving your orders as the boss.
I do believe exactly what you're saying. And then I do find that sometimes certain situations, people are envious and jealous and they don't support one another. And yeah, I've been in some of those environments, and it's, it's disheartening because once you get someone to believe in themselves, then they can create unlimited potential. They have this ability because then you believing in them gets them to believe in themselves.
Sure.
So when people are so busy trying to climb on the top of each other to be on top, when you actually lift people up, it creates a whole different vibrational frequency in the group as a collective to expand even further out, right? Is that what you find?
Yeah, it's absolutely true. The question is, how do you create that? And it is not easy. There are let's call it a minority of cultures out there in orgs that are high performance. They really value strong effort, strong achievement. They hire bright people, etc. That's great, but is that always a positive culture? Just to make an argument here, half the time those high performing cultures are really positive, and they understand what you're saying, and that's why people like to stay there, because it's not just competition; it's also people trying to help others grow. And as long as we believe in each other, then it's not just a competitive race, cutthroat type thing. But then there's the other half of high performing orgs where it really is kill or be killed. People stabbing each other in the back, trying to race hard to get those limited opportunities that are available. And that's not going to make someone, it might make someone successful. It might make them wealthy. It won't make them happy, fulfilled, and peaceful and full of joy. So the question for anyone listening to this is, what's your goal? If your goal is simplistically to find wealth and success, define that simply, good for you. That's part of the equation for me, but not all of it. And there's a downside. There's a challenge. There's a stress. There's a loneliness. There's an ability to be looked at by others as if you're missing some of the variables we think you should be focused on. And if you want the other half, which is I want a positive work culture, I want to feel purpose, I want to help others, not just me. Good for you. We need more of you. Sometimes that's going to benefit you because people are going to know all the good things that you've done and they're going to award you with opportunities. Other times they're going to know that they're willing and able to be more cutthroat than you, and they might get somewhere somehow faster than you. That's okay. I can live with that. You have options. I like to talk about fit, Noelle. How well do you fit in this culture, this team versus this culture and this team? A career is a 30 to 40-year commitment at least. And during that time, you should ask yourself how well you feel comfortable and able to be successful. Comfortable, that's determined by a variety of things. Able to be successful, different but related. When you get both of those together, that's an ideal for most people. And it's not easy to find. And it depends on what skill set you have, which one you want to grow, how well you can find good people with whom to work. Sounds easy when I say it, but finding it in practice can be difficult, which is why you're not supposed to be loyal and wedded for no reason except they hired you to one company for 40 years. You're supposed to think openly through talking like you and I are talking right now, through journaling, through use of a coach, et cetera, about what's going to make you happy and productive when you're 60 and 70 so that you can start making thoughtful moves to find better fit where who you are matches what you need so that you're not just 45 and 50, grateful for the paycheck and not fulfilled at all. Does that make sense?
Yes, because when you are operating from your passion, you're operating from your heart, and it's emitting a different type of energy and frequency out to the world. And is that what ties into teach us about authenticity? I think that's going to tap into that.
Yeah, I mean, anyone who cares to use the concepts and the words that you've been using, which I really respect, absolutely meshes very well with what I talk about for years around authenticity. The idea is simple. It's easier to be authentic most of the time. People think the opposite. It's easier to manage impressions, give people what they need, and play it safe. Don't cause waves, say what they expect us to say, etc. At work. Look how they expect us to look. They think that's easier. That's actually easier at first, but if you want to advance long term, your trajectory will be fast if you figure out a more honest way to exist, which usually makes you more comfortable as well. Authenticity is the desire to not manage impressions full time. We never go unfiltered 100% all the time. I think we can all agree that in the dark recesses of our minds, there are things we should probably keep to ourselves. But the reason I talk about authenticity all the time is because at work, instead of taking ourself, we take this. And I'm just arguing that this is way more productive and helpful than showing very little of yourself. Now, it's not just important for you because it allows people to know you, to see you as a person, not just a professional, to know that you're imperfect, hilariously so, just like them. That's you're talking about your habits, your screw ups, your mistakes, your interests, your family. All of these more raw, unfiltered, traditionally not work things actually are amazing fuel at work for building rapport and camaraderie with people on your team. Number one, it helps you attract people because they're more comfortable and they're more interested. Number two, and this is a huge part of authenticity, you validate others by being a little more raw, honest, and interesting as a human, not just a professional. You validate others who often feel they must manage impressions full time to stay out of trouble and give people what they need. And when you joke about your imperfections, your screw ups, your setbacks, your interests, your family, the challenges you face, the times you really failed, all the wins and the losses and the idiosyncrasies that make you you, others don't feel like they have to hide them or fake regarding these things nearly as much. Just by being more authentic in your own shoes, you've made someone else feel more comfortable being ridiculously human, just like you. That's the power of authenticity.
And as humans, we are going to mess up and have those failures. That's the part of being human.
Absolutely.
And then how about time management? You have a whole course on time management. Can you give us some tips on good time management?
Sure. I mean, it's so funny you'd ask that. That was the first ad-libbed course that I ever did. And it was the first #1 global course in their library that I ever scored. We had finished one day, and then my producer and director, they were just amazing. They're like, "We got some time. Do you have thoughts on this?" I was like, "Yes, I have thoughts on that." And they said, "Well, you need some time to prep." And I said, "Yeah, give me 15 minutes." And I thought through some things. There's basically a few points I wanted to offer. And we sat down and filmed it. And this little course, which originally was 12 minutes and was expanded later, I think, to hit around 20 or so, which is still a very short course, has been seen by several million people and led to a lot of interesting changes in teams and workplaces. In fact, a couple conferences were organized around my take on time management. Now, there are people, for anyone listening, who are far more focused. As I've said, I'm a world-class generalist in leadership and careers, and that fits me well. There are people who more traditionally niche out content areas. And Dave Crenshaw, if you don't know who that is, you should check him out. One of his real deep areas of expertise is productivity and time management. And he would give you something more complex. But I looked at all those folks who I know that do meaningful, thoughtful, complex approaches to the topic you've asked about. And I thought to myself, what if I'm talking to busy professionals? This type of question, this type of filter that I'm about to share has helped me make so many courses. What if I was talking to a bunch of busy professionals and they're stressed out and they don't need to hear about theory and they don't have 6 hours to think about this topic? Maybe they've got 10 minutes, 15 minutes. What would you tell them? What are the top 2 or 3 things, not 20 things, that they should understand? That's a fun, challenging filter to force on yourself when you think about an area of knowledge. And when I did that for time management, I came up with 3 very, very simple things. You really have to brutally understand what's most important in front of you. I think in terms of 80-20, the old Pareto principle, there's a minority of things, call it the 20%, that are most important. Think about people, projects, tasks. 20% are more important. The rest aren't unimportant. They're just less important. I think we can all agree. You got to learn to prioritize every day, every week, every quarter. What's the most important person, task, project I'm working on? Know what those are because they deserve your best. They are more important. That's what it is. That's number 1. Number 2, understand your Einstein window. That's a phrase I made up that became quite popular and still is quite popular. Your Einstein window. That's that period of time during every day where most days you're most clear and you think more easily, and complex things are fun puzzles and they don't give you a headache. They're intriguing. That's the window where your brain is optimized and creativity and problem solving are more likely. For some people, that's at midnight, believe it or not. For some people, that's 6 in the morning. For me, it's usually 8 to 11 in the morning, which is fairly normal, but everyone's different. Number 1, prioritize 80-20. Know what matters every day, every week, every quarter. What's the most important? Number 2, when does your brain operate the most effectively? Not efficiently, but effectively, the best. And then number 3, and this is where a lot of people fail, you got to learn to protect that window, which people at work aren't always willing to do. People will come at you and abuse you if you don't know how to say no. People will absolutely bombard you with phone calls and texts and emails all day long, and you have to learn to protect your brain during that window of time when it functions the best. So close your door if you can get away with it, or go work in that empty conference where people can't find you for a while. Turn off your email, turn it on maybe 3 times a day to get updates. I don't know what specific, slightly risky tactics you might use, but you deserve to protect the integrity of that small Einstein window of time so that you can actually let your brain do what it's capable of doing during that period of time. That's my quick take on time management. That's had some pretty good success.
That's great. I've worked with several coaches in my lifetime. I've been a realtor for 20 years, helping people downsize, go into retirement communities. And I was taught time blocking, where you block out chunks of time in your daily schedule for if it's exercise or your lunch, meeting someone for lunch. But of course, for your highest, I loved how you called it Einstein window, because there was times I actually work out of my house a lot. The doorbell will be ringing. I have my phone on mute. I won't answer the doorbell. I won't deal with the phone because I'm in creator mode, or I'm in this momentum. And I sometimes have felt like I am Einstein because my hair is a mess and I have completely gone into this new realm and dimension that I refuse to let anybody invade. So I think there's a lot to be said about protecting your sacred space, your energy, and that time. So don't let anybody bother you with the beeping of your phone, because all those texts,
turn off that thing, man. Yeah.
Right. That can wait till your time is, till you get to it. They'll be there. And just tune into yourself. That's when you go into your higher self, connect to your inner self and your authentic self, right? Loving your own energy, your own frequency. So that's a beautiful way of just connecting on multiple levels. I love your theories on this, and thank you for sharing those with us. And I want to ask you, what about an elevator pitch? Everybody has to do this at some point in their life for many things. What's your take on elevator pitches?
I mean, the most important thing I could say, I could tell you some of what the course says, what it means to precisely, concisely say who you are, what you do, and what you want to do later, what you aspire to do. It's not that complex. But it's more important that you know the importance of this topic. It's more important that you practice this and have a few versions of it, because you're going to meet different people, and the same version isn't always the same. So that you can look in the mirror, look at your partner, look at a coach, someone, and practice this. What happens 99% of the time is that people find themselves in social situations where someone, maybe unexpectedly, who might be an interesting person in their network for different reasons, says to them, "Oh, hey man, hey Todd, nice to meet you. What do you do?" And then people aren't prepared, and they say something that sounds too technical and not understandable, or they ramble on for 2 minutes or some ridiculously long thing instead of the 15 seconds or so it should probably take to succinctly answer that in the first vibe. So what I would say to people is just realize that this is a situation, usually weekly for most professionals, sometimes many times a week. You're going to be in a position to say, "Oh, and you've got to be ready to answer that." And there's a simple formula you can follow. You got to say, "I'm a mechanical engineer. I'm really focused on this industry, but I have real aspirations to understand AI and robotics as it relates to blah, blah, blah." Now, the whole thing I just spit out here, just riffing, lasted about 10 seconds, but it's about who I am, what I do, and where I'm thinking about going. And that's all a pitch is. My biggest message to people about that is to know it's going to be common and important in your career. So don't approach it unprepared every time. Start ahead of time, do the homework, and practice a little bit, and you'll be so much more calm and clear when someone says, "Hey, nice to meet you. What do you do?"
And you can even record yourself with your phone and play it back, so you can see how you're engaging with someone, whether it's through body language, your emotional intelligence, your frequency. So that's a good way to tie that in and replay and change
Well,
it up.
if you're brave, let me tell you, don't just look at yourself, which is hard and useful. You're correct. If you're brave, you'll find 1 or 2 others you trust. They could be different people, a good friend, a trusted colleague, a coach, a mentor, etc., and show it to them and say, "What 2 things really stand out to you? Just be honest, give it to me," and then be quiet and let them watch it and get back to you. And you might be surprised what you hear, because others definitely see you differently than you see yourself.
Yes, that's happening a lot these days, I think, too, because people are growing and evolving with everything. Everything's accelerated right now, and we have the capabilities to do anything we've ever wanted in our lifetime, and now's the time to do it. So we're all stepping into that power. I wanted to ask you, because if we were to ever have another situation where we have to work remotely again, which could happen, you know, we never know.
Yep.
There might be somebody watching this video right now, and I would love for you to give us some working from remotely tips.
Well, thanks. It's a great question. It's a very important topic. It's never going away. And if we ever run into weird disasters and pandemics and things again, which we probably will at some point, then we might have heavily embraced that mode of working once again. The short answer is to have dedicated space. You don't want to use a space that's going to be invaded, if you don't have to, by other human beings or loud pets or the construction right outside that window. You can choose a place that has quiet, that you can protect, that's huge. And then you can work on lighting and the mic and all the obvious little tech issues. But quiet, dedicated space is the foundation there. And then in terms of actually interacting as an online employee or an online remote leader, it's about staying connected. It's about creatively staying connected, not just complying with the meetings and times we said, but sometimes mixing up the channels that we use, sometimes mixing up who's responsible for what in different meetings, also that this doesn't become too rote and boring and routinized. Sometimes it means trying to do things people don't expect, such as calling when there wasn't a scheduled call because you really wanted to say hi and check on them and see if they're okay about this stressful project they were working on. Or maybe making a road trip to see some people face to face. That's hugely important, even if it's only once or twice a year. And trying to do a little more or a little differently than you're asked to do. Anytime you can say, hey, Steve, here's this thing you asked for. I also decided that we should probably consider blah and blah in our analysis. And I threw that in case that's of use to you. Anything you do that's positive and off script is a wonderful way to stay kind of front of mind with other people that you work with remotely. So those are some tips to get you started.
And I do think if you take on something you've never done before, it's going to get you to use different parts of your brains to bring it in and try new things. And then you're going to think new things, you're going to experience new things, and you're going to grow and evolve to a different level. So sometimes stepping out of our comfort zone is one of the best things we can do for ourselves.
Huge, absolutely huge. They say real change doesn't begin until you get a little uncomfortable.
Right, right. You talk about 10 steps to leadership, capabilities. Please share some of those.
Well, if I remember, and I don't always remember perfectly because my body of work at this point is kind of large, but if I remember, Noelle, some of those actually overlap really nicely with the 5 that I chose to use as a backbone for my latest book, which is called Dancing with Monsters. And there was a few in there that were really impactful in my experience as a professional and in my observations, which is the value that I add. I observe a ton over a few decades, and then I figure out how to think about that and help people navigate that themselves. I'll give you one that's an example. Candor, not just kindness. Candor, not just kindness. So kindness should be awesome. We should value that, correct? It's about being positive and congenial and supportive and helpful. I think everyone's going to universally acknowledge that. Candor also is almost universally acknowledged as useful for meaningful communication and group dynamics. Candor, speaking on the fly as needed, no innuendo, straight to the point. So most people think of candor as a little risky, a little blunt, a little caustic. Most people think of kindness as simplistically good, and they're both wrong. Kindness is one of my favorite things for sure. I've been preaching versions of that for so many years, but I got to tell you, as corporations have evolved, as organizations have evolved, and lots of them have got on the positivity bandwagon, which is very wonderful and important. Sometimes they have done it so much that we love positivity and exclude things that are difficult, not negative, not wrong, but difficult. And difficult is needed sometimes to make us move forward as professionals. So that's where candor comes in. So here's the rub. Candor, saying what needs to be said. No innuendo, on the fly, right to the point. Sounds rough, but here's the thing. If you have candor, exhibited by many people, and you do not have a foundation of kindness as a part of your culture, yeah, candor is going to be rough, difficult to digest, and cause more problems than it does solutions for sure. But if you have a meaningful culture that is defined by, among other things, kindness and its related ideas, positivity, supportiveness, etc., then in that context, candor, that biting straight to the point way of speaking on occasion, is a thing that becomes digestible just because of the context in which it was delivered, the type of team vibe that we have. Those are conditions under which candor has big impact, ruffles very few feathers, and helps people actually think without getting upset the way they would in other cultures. So that's a great rule. It's not about one simple thing being good or bad. It's about sometimes how they relate to each other. You need candor and kindness. One without the other is going to be ultimately, oddly, a problem.
Makes sense to me. And I do realize sometimes we go through some very heavy changes, but I think out of those changes, we have this huge amount of growth that occurs because of it.
Whether you win or lose, if your eyes are open, you'll learn something.
And it's getting multiple perspectives. If we can just step out of our body or move out of the body and look through somebody else's eyes in the room or several people's eyes and get different perspectives, that changes the way everything's handled. And then you might come up with a new brilliant concept because you didn't see that point of view before.
Absolutely, positively true. I love to say that success is a team sport. You said it perfectly, Noelle. The truth is that multiple chefs are needed. We could argue about how many and what's too much, but it's not just one. I can tell you that much for sure if you want great ideas moving fast, for sure.
So please tell me some more about your books here. You have quite a lineup, I noticed when I dug deeper into your website. And I'm curious like how those came about, what they're representing for you, what draws them out of you.
Well, I follow my heart the way a lot of people like you do. And I do look at the market and needs of people that I serve as an expert, but it basically comes from my interest and heart and what I think is fun. And then I find a way to shoehorn that into needs that you have and meet in the middle. It all started, to be honest with you, when I was teaching MBA students many years ago, and I was a reviewer on the textbook that we were using for the course. It was an organizational behavior course, and I forgot how expensive. It was ridiculously expensive. And these are working professionals, usually at night, and every dollar counts. And I felt bad making them spend tons of money on this textbook. And so I decided, look, I'm an expert. Why don't I just write a book, self-publish it, and boil down away from all of the theory and away from all the bells and whistles, and just give practical talk with some bulleted advice, topic by topic by topic, and then give it to the students for free, and then supplement that maybe with some readings from Harvard Business Review or other sources we might want to read about in the news. And they loved it because it saved them money and it was clear and crisp and practical. And then they started giving it to their bosses and so on. And it grew and grew and made me ask myself the obvious question, okay, what's next? And the two best, I've had several answers to that question. The two best ones that are getting me some eyeballs, if you will. One is called Show Your Ink, which is just a collection of 20 short stories that people really enjoy about leadership and learning from mistakes and some career advice and what it means to improve yourself. And it's just 20 funny, emotional, sometimes sad, personal stories. And that's turned into a thing all on its own. I do a lot of keynotes for Show Your Ink. And then the most recent one that has come out is Dancing with Monsters, which is actually one of those colorful, short leadership fables that you've probably seen in the past, things like Who Moved My Cheese and related fable type stories. It's about a bunch of misfit monsters who've got a big challenge. They don't know how to do the one thing that they're supposed to do, which is scare kids. And they have to go through some challenges and find a leader to help them believe in themselves, find some confidence, and get the work done. And they finally do. And it's kind of a fun walk through a lot of classic leadership ideas, such as candor, not just kindness, to get them functioning as a team.
You're teaching that creatively, I have to say, like making it monsters.
Yep.
And I saw your trailer. It's good. It's good.
Oh,
I saw the creativity flowing out of him. Oh, he's getting good with this.
Thank you.
So I do want to ask you, what is your superpower?
My superpower is the ability to translate information that's useful in a way that motivates people. So let me say that again. My superpower is, I could probably name a few, but there's only one that stands out the most. And it's the ability to understand and deliver information that's useful to people in a way that motivates them. There are better scholars on planet Earth. I was pretty good, published a lot of research back in the day, but no, I wasn't the best. I was just good. There were plenty who were great when they walked into a classroom. Some of them, not all of them, knew how to translate that into practical advice in a motivational way that would make people care about using this knowledge to go better themselves, better their team, better their organization, better their career. And slowly, first as a professor and then later as an entrepreneur, I've realized that I have the ability, which I'm very, very lucky to admit to you, I have the ability to be a world-class translator of practical, useful information in a way that makes people go, yeah, I can do that too. Watch me go.
I understand that. And you're a very quick processor and speaker. Like when you deliver, you're delivering fast and intentionally. So your processing, I understand, I can see it, the energy around you. It's being processed very quickly and projected very rapidly as well. What's your message that you would want to actually share with the entire universe?
The entire universe, no pressure. All right, do it. You are enough. Wonderfully imperfect. So what? You are enough. I love talking about that topic. It's a core part of Dancing with Monsters. You are enough. Once you realize that you are enough and that your imperfections are in fact just variables, parts of you that you can think about however you want to, and in fact sometimes leverage because they're not the problems you thought they were. They're just parts of you you've got to creatively look at. Once you realize that, you realize the second part of my answer to your question, which is that more is always possible. Now, getting your hands around that just requires you to be in a good place and get some confidence. So I would start with, believe me, you are good enough, imperfections and all. Once you believe that, you start to truly believe that more for you, for your team, for your career, for the planet, for the universe, since Noelle asked, is possible.
Love it. Love it. Well, Mr. Dr. Todd Dewett, can you share with us how people can find you and magically work with you?
Sure. Thanks for asking. I mean, two obvious places you can come find me anytime. One is my website, drdewett.com. That's DRDEWETT.com. Or just get on LinkedIn, which is kind of my home on the internet, and connect with me. If you got a question or a comment, send me a message. I would love to get back to you.
Which is exactly how we connected. I took your course and I reached out to you and I said, thanks for your great course. I really enjoyed it. And then this turned into more connections and talking about these amazing topics. And then the involvement that you've shared with this planet is amazing. So thank you for your work and please continue to share it with us.
My pleasure. Thanks, Noelle.
You got it.